Hello and welcome to Season 11, Episode 8 of the Data Governance Podcast. And I'm thrilled that this week I am talking to the wonderful Jovita Tam, who has been on the podcast before, but not since Season 5, which is amazing that I've left it so long because she's always got such great advice. And I'm really looking forward to talking to her about perhaps data governance people who find themselves perhaps accidental AI leaders in their organization. So let's not talk anymore. Let's dive in. So it's great to have you here, Jovita. So Jovita is, if you haven't heard the last one or you've forgotten, she's a business-focused data and AI advisor and dual qualified attorney, which makes her way cleverer than me. I love talking to Jovita because she's so smart. But I think what I really love about her is she has this unique multidisciplinary perspective, combining technology, law, and change management. And more recently, when we've been having a chat, she's been really advocating for the AI governance and responsible innovation. So I thought it was definitely time that we ought to have you back. You were last here in November 2023. So welcome back, Jovita.
Thank you for having me. I can't believe the last time was November 2023. It just went by in blink of an eye.
I know, time flies. I can say when you're having fun or when you're doing data, I think. It's so all encompassing and all absorbing when we're working in data. So I think it's always great talking to you. And when we had a chat a few weeks ago and decided to get you back on the podcast, we were talking about the fact that we're both seeing that more data governance leaders are actually being asked to take on AI governance responsibilities.
Mhm.
Clearly, that wasn't part of their scope initially. Most of them perhaps have been doing data governance before AI was even considered at their organization. Is that I'm seeing that? Is it what you're seeing as well? And why do you think some organizations are looking to their data teams to take on AI governance?
I think I'm definitely seeing that. Perhaps starting a couple of months ago, there was like a time where I've noticed that with a lot of data leaders, all of a sudden their title changed to be, to have AI in it. So like there was a bunch of CDOs that turned into CDI, AIOs. And, as I talk to more people and there are more and more kind of data governance teams which are being asked to take on this responsibility. I think there's several reasons for it. I think for some organizations where they already have a very robust data governance framework, particularly I see this in regulated industries, right? They may feel like that, okay, do we necessarily need a dedicated and separate, AI governance team? And for a lot of those organizations, they're like, no, we don't necessarily need that because we already have a more robust data governance program that we've been working on for years. And because there's a lot of overlap, particularly at the earlier stages, they're like, why don't we have our data governance team absorb that, right? And for other organizations, it could be something else entirely. They could be adopting AI, still haven't answered the fundamental question of who owns the risk when it comes to AI. So they're just, we are all AI. And then you go there and ask, well, who's necessarily responsible to put in the guardrails to make sure that we're having safe innovation, and kind of people look at you with the deers in the headlight look, right? And kind of given a lot of these, then a lot of the data leaders decide that they would perhaps step up and absorb that responsibility, or they start out being very active advocates, right, in those situations and go, guys, like, we are not ready for this. We need to look at this. We need to look at that. And then, naturally, it kind of turns into a segue.
Yeah, and I think I'm just thinking of one of my clients. He was advocating for AI governance,
Mhm.
and he wasn't particularly trying to empire build or take it on, but he was asked to have some input into the paper and the proposal for
Mhm.
what happened. And I think he was the one talking the most sense. So it's then ended up with him. So that's quite interesting that, it wasn't something he was after. And now he's kind of thinking, well, we need to upskill the team to be able to deal with
Yeah.
this. But I think he's just happy that he feels like at least it will be done and done well. And I think it perhaps, I wonder whether, this is a supplemental question, but I wonder if it reflects on the data governance leaders that are being asked to take on AI governance are perhaps either more mature or are more pragmatic in how they're doing data governance. So they're seeing as value adding in their organization, not as somebody that's hindering and blocking. So they feel like they're a safe pair of hands to like be equally pragmatic with AI governance.
Well, I think part of it is it depends on the maturity when it comes to kind of where the organization is at with their data literacy, data enablement, and things like that. And for some organizations, definitely they kind of look at the table and they look at, the kind of various technology leaders or even non-technology based leaders, and they go, okay, well, who is in the best position, right, to get us started in this journey? And I completely agree with you. I think for a lot of data governance professionals, it is not about, empire building. It's mostly that, out of the goodness of the heart and of the concern that they're seeing this very large risk, or like they're seeing that in some ways, some organizations are digging holes very fast for themselves, right? They're moving very quickly. And, I think the data governance professional, they understand how difficult for many of them it has been to get their organization to a certain point, right? And they don't want to all of a suddenly have the risk profile increase and to incur a kind of governance debt, if you would. And so they're just like, guys, like, let's not make the same mistake twice, because they have understood how difficult it is to change the needle. And then naturally, a lot of these credible leaders, they have the support, right, of the organization to go, why don't you kind of take the initiative in this? You seem to be, the person that knows best how to handle this, right?
No, I think that's really true. It's interesting that your kind of experiences are very similar to mine. So we talked about organizations perhaps directly going to their data governance leaders,
Yeah.
expanding their scope. Are there other scenarios that you've come across where someone might become, what you might consider an unexpected AI
Yeah.
governance leader?
Yeah, and I think we just touched on it. There's the organizations actively, approaching. They're like, okay, we need to think about this, and then they look to their data governance team to say, expand your scope and so on. There's also the scenario that we've just talked about, which is data governance professional going, okay, well, this risk is happening, right? It's increasing. We need to do something about it, and they raise their hand. So I would consider that as one of those a little bit more of an unexpected kind of an idea. And then I think another scenario that I find is that obviously, we know that it particularly at the beginning, right? There's a lot of overlap between the AI governance journey and sort of the data governance journey. So a company might say, okay, we need somebody, but we don't want to put the responsibility with the data governance team. But then they're looking at candidates who have a very different approach from the existing data governance leader within an organization. And the data governance leader, although may not be thinking about empire building, is thinking about, well, if we introduce this completely different approach, right? It may be an approach that they've tried in the past and didn't work, or because they have intimate knowledge of, the processes, the people, and change management, they're like, this is low chance of success. So they're like, how do I work with this new person? Or do I tell my organization that, hey, at least at this part of the journey, we are best to kind of rejig internally to absorb this responsibility instead of having this completely separate function from this new, individual group or whatever. So I think that's another way where there's the unexpected, kind of decision that the data governance leader needs to make, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm sure that there are some data governance leaders listening to this podcast who are thinking, "Oh gosh, I can see that that's coming my way in my organization." So you must have probably seen data governance leaders facing this scenario. And what's the biggest mistake that you think they tend to make when faced with this do I or don't I take the AI governance on?
I think what I would classify as the biggest mistake right now is thinking about this in absolute terms and jumping in it too fast, right? There is the thinking of, oh, like I'm not an expert in AI governance, or it does require certain skills that I was previously not thinking about, right? So if I own this, I'll own this forever, right? And that's not necessarily going to be true, right? And I think that we've been talking about AI for, a long while now, at least for those of us in the industry, is sort of like, every day it feels like it's an intense echo chamber sort of a thing. But the reality is, if you take a step back, take a look at how it aligns with business strategies, how quickly some companies are actually implementing it and things like that, there's still a lot of uncertainty that's going on. So, don't think that, oh, if I raise my hand to say, this is what, potentially we're going to look at increasing our scope, you own it forever, or you need to, become a lawyer or any of those things. So I think mentally take a pause and go, okay, well, how does it look like right now? How does it look like for the next couple of steps, right? And I think the other part of it, which I mentioned, is jumping in too fast, right? Because we are very, I feel like as data governance professionals, we are very eager to do the right thing for the organization, right? To be like, hey, we're here to help. We're not here to say no to the business. We're here to make sure that everybody is working very well together. And a lot of data governance professionals I know are extremely collaborative people. So there's a tendency for us to stretch ourselves. If we see a hole, a gap, is like, we will stretch ourselves to fill this hole to make it work. But do recognize that this is an increase in scope and new set of responsibility. So you may be in the best position to assist the organization and to lead this forward. But before you fully commit to it, do negotiate with the organization and go, well, in order for us to succeed with this part of the scope, and whether it falls within data governance or not, these are perhaps the things that we need to take a look at, right? And it might need resources, it might need upscaling, it might need, like, beefing up of the education program for everyone, right? So you can't expect that, like, for example, the existing data governance training budget, like now we add the AI governance curriculum without increasing in funding. So thinking about these things in advance before you're like, yes, I'm going to lead this and take this forward, you know, I think will make a difference.
Excellent. So, I think perhaps, thinking about those kind of things, some people I think are probably perhaps anxious that they're, because to be fair, a lot of people don't choose to go into data governance. It tends to happen
Mhm.
to us, a lot of us by accident.
Yep.
And as you know, it can be very overwhelming to begin with. And now all of a sudden that they're being asked to learn something else or take on something else that's kind of new and scary too. But, I think that perhaps data governance professionals are in a good place to take on this. So I wonder what's your view on what's the biggest advantage that data governance professionals already have when it comes to AI governance?
Um, I think I would say it's a few things, right? And as you said, is a lot of data governance professionals didn't choose, like, it's sort of like, at least like looking back a number of years, like, it's what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, generally, I weren't expecting, because the industry is so relatively young, right? That the kids would be like, when I grow up, I want to be a data governance leader, right? Sort of a thing. And so, like, it mostly is, sometimes it's out of the necessity of the organization, that these leaders step up, right? And a lot of it is very much a personality and a skill set thing. So I know so many wonderful data governance professionals who are very multi-talented, very curious, right? So I think naturally for many data governance professionals, from ourselves and from within, we have a lot of great qualities to take on AI governance at this point in the journey where there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of change management that needs to be done, a lot of education, both in the self and educating the organization. So I think that is one thing with respect to kind of the leader and the team themselves. And the other part of it is I really think it's the experience, right? For a lot of the data governance team and the data governance leader, they have been kind of fighting the battle day in, day out, right? With data governance. So they understand where the bodies are buried, they understand the people like who are going to be kind of the people that are pushing this forward, right? How to work with an existing set of stakeholders, how, the business leaders deal with change in an organization. And those are things where, a lot of data governance leaders, they're already sitting on that information. They have experience working with it, going, this work, this doesn't work, where somebody who's like kind of newer to the organization or doesn't have like that experience, right? Um, would I would say I'd be at a slight disadvantage, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I know, I'm clearly biased, but I do think that the data governance lead, the team, they tend to be almost like connectors if you're thinking about in terms of networkers, because they do know so many people across a whole organization, and they're in a unique place to kind of break down silos and know who needs to talk to each other. And I think that's it's vital when it comes to data governance. And from what you're saying, it's got to be helpful with AI governance as well.
It is. And I think the other way of looking at it is that for a lot of organizations that are moving very quickly towards AI, is when they need to kind of turn the pilot and then to scale it, that's when they go back and ask some of the more fundamental questions, right? How is our data? Are we ready to scale this and have it as a success? Because at that point in time, you're not really just looking at a technology kind of a problem, right? You're looking at everything else because, okay, great, your technology works, but on a day-to-day basis, for it to be a part of BAU, it takes so much more, right? So I think naturally there is going to be an element of data governance where a lot of companies needs to go look at, right, as they're kind of looking to get that ROI that they're hoping for with AI. And so I think that's also another advantage for data governance professional, particularly at this stage, right, of the journey.
Absolutely. So you very kindly agreed to run a masterclass. I was going to say with me,
My
more like
pleasure.
for me. Okay, you're the expert, not me. Which we're going to do in early September. So I think you're going to have more time then to kind of look into,
Yeah.
the actual data governance skills that give professionals an advantage in AI, and perhaps on the other side of the coin, where they might need to think completely differently when it comes to AI governance than they have
Yeah.
data governance. So I think that's going to be really good. And if you're interested in that, listen out. We will be sharing more details of that. So I think just one more question before we run out of time.
Okay.
But I'm almost like 100% sure that there are some people listening to this episode thinking everything you've just been discussing, Jovita, really sounds like my situation. I'm being asked to take this on. So, I know we've got the masterclass coming up where we'll dive into a lot more detail, but just to round up this podcast interview, what would your be advice on how they should go about approaching this challenge?
I think we've already talked about it, in the previous 15, 20 minutes, but I think as with most data governance professional who's kind of went through the journey from the very beginning, there's no one size fit all, right? Really understanding where your organization is, the uniqueness of it, and where you want to go, right, is the most important thing. And I think the same thing comes with AI governance. I think awareness goes a long, long way. And I know that it is tempting to sit here and go, okay, this is the path, right? Sort of a thing. but I really don't think such thing exists. I think with more experience, if you understand your organization better, you have more change management experience, then you'd be like, okay, well, I know where the major potholes are, if you would, right? But when it comes to this, it really is like there is going to be a lot of prioritization, and you are going to make it like there is going to be a strong focus of making it work for your organization. So that kind of moment of truth of this is working, or this will never work in my organization, at least right now. And coming to terms and coming to peace with it, I think goes a long way. Because there's always I think when I first joined the industry, and I think we talked about this last time, right, is the grass is greener on the other side. Other organizations always get data governance better than my organization. Why am I stuck with this mess? And then the reality is we are all kind of facing different challenges. And the same thing will happen for AI governance as well, and understand where you're in the AI value chain, diving a little bit deeper and go, okay, well, what are the specific technologies? What is the business impact of these technologies that we're using, instead of a very blanket, oh, we need AI governance, but it's like, look under the hood, right? Is it Copilot? Am I building like a model that, touches on some like high risk scenarios? All of it matters. And I know it could be very, very overwhelming, but I think the only way forward is, with awareness, and take it one step at a time.
And yeah, I love that, because and that's kind of what I tell people about data governance. And exactly the same as what you said with data governance. It's not a you design one approach and it you've got to stick with it come what may. If I meet you for the first time and say, Jovita, this is my lovely data governance framework and I'm implementing in your department next, and you look at it and go, well, that won't work. If I insist on doing it, it's not going to work at all. So we have to evolve our data governance framework. So perhaps that's another advantage that data governance, well, people who are doing data governance well have already got that mindset to say,
Exactly.
yeah, well, let's try this with AI governance. If it doesn't work, we'll move on and we'll try something different. So it has been a pleasure as always
Okay.
talking to you, Jovita, and you've shared so much practical advice for, I'm sure so many people listening to this are in exactly the scenario that we are discussing. And I'm really excited about the masterclass, which is on the 5th of September. And we will be sharing the link soon for people to be able to sign up. So I hope you'll be able to join us then. And thank you so much, Jovita, for taking your time and sharing such great advice.
And thank you for having me. And see you at the masterclass.
See you then. It's always a joy talking to Jovita, and we actually carried on talking way after we ended the recording. But you don't need to feel left out, as we mentioned in the podcast. Yeah, I'm really thrilled that Jovita's going to do a masterclass with me. She says, I think probably more for me. She is such an expert in this. And on the masterclass, which is going to be on the 5th of September, she is going to deep dive into having a look more at perhaps the skills that we have as data governance professionals that will be becoming very useful if we're taking over AI governance, but also looking at the flip side of it, and perhaps looking at the things where perhaps we might have to think of things slightly different when it comes to AI governance than we're used to with our data governance hat on. So I do hope you will join us at the masterclass. You will be able to register for that on my website, nicolaaskham.com, or you can register for my email, and we will be sharing the link to sign up for that in the weeks in the run up to it. I hope you can join us then. In the meantime, we have another podcast next week. You don't have to wait till September for some more practical advice. Next week, it's just a bite-sized episode with me, and I'm going to answer the question, is it important to value data?